Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about the Fellspyre Chronicles, Book 1. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today we are reviewing the Fellspyre Chronicles, Book 1. Is there going to be a Book 2? I don't really think so. This tells a complete tale, but the Book 1 thing just means that it's the first of any story you could tell in this world, as Philip Kennedy Johnson wrote basically like I guess what's a D&D manual in the back of this book that's included. So if you want to create your own campaign or whatever, following some rules, you could do that. I'm not familiar with Dungeons and Dragons whatsoever, so I couldn't really fill you in there on the quality of the campaign. Just know there's like 30 additional pages back here of descriptions of worlds, of characters, of monsters, and with some stats and stuff like that. How currency works and a whole bunch of stuff. Strength, dexterity, con, int, wist, cha. I have no idea what that shit means, but that's in the back. But why we're here to talk about comics, this is a comic book channel, so let's talk about the book. This is available in hardcover and softcover. I've done an overview of it on the channel already. Please go watch that if you want to look at this gorgeous, gorgeous hardcover. Man, I talked about in the overview about how I had started reading this when it was coming out, and when it was coming out a couple of years ago, maybe two, it was called The Last God, not The Fellspyre Chronicles. I think Fellspyre Chronicles was like a subtitle, but the thing that's on the covers is The Last God. Now, I don't know why they changed the name or whatever, but that is what it was coming out as in single issues for 12 of them, right? And now it's collected as this other thing. So if you're wondering why, maybe legal reasons, I'm not sure. But I guess with the idea of creating a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, the Fellspyre Chronicles fits that whole like schema better than the Last God campaign. So what is this book? It's a fantasy book, right? And it's along the lines of, I would say, Lord of the Rings and Spartacus. I think that's a good thing to throw in there. And Philip Kennedy Johnson and the artist here, Riccardo Federici, I mean, he's just unlocked like a new world here. This is amazing art. Amazing. This is a book you cannot read in a dark room because Riccardo Federici, they just color over his pencils and everything is just penciled to the brim. He's leaving nothing to chance. Every little detail is there. Every shadow, every hatch line, every cross hatch line, everything that gives texture to something in a pencil drawing is here in this book. So you want to read this in the brightest light possible. I learned that about a quarter of the way through. Like, man, I really should turn on the lights. And then I did here in the room, all of them, and I was like, oh, wow. Oh, wow. It's incredible how detailed the art is. It's phenomenal. Again, go see my overview for that if you want a closer look at it. But there's some awesome stuff in here. It's just 12 issues plus a little addendum and in the back. This appendix story here is just an awesome, awesome story. I think when I was reading it, the first time, like I only read, I think, the first 3 issues and then stopped. I was talking about in the overview how I didn't really have a good reference of what these characters were, where everything was, what the layout of the world is, and didn't know if it was that like necessary, but I found myself flipping back to the inset map on the main page of the hardcover here. I could have used the book jacket, but I chose not to. In fact, let's take this book jacket off just for sanity's sake. But I felt myself turning to this frequently, just the way you do reading The Lord of the Rings or reading Game of Thrones, things like that, to give yourself an idea of like, all right, they were here, now they're going here, that becomes more and more important because this is basically a story of two tales. You're getting the original story of how what we think are our heroes vanquished a demon and how the second group of heroes has to go and undo or fix the mistakes that they made along the first journey. So they take a little bit of a different grouping, you know what I mean? The same way, like, if you look at maps of Lord of the Rings, they have like Gandalf's route Frodo and Sam's route, all sorts of stuff. You can kind of trace your own here on the map. The other thing I did frequently was go to this first sequence where they kind of tell the story of who was in the band of the first group of heroes and what their names were, what race they belonged to, like are they human, are they elf, are they anything, or Elva as they call them here. Do they have magic? Who are they in relation to our main characters? All that's here on like the first page. So I found myself frequently going back because over the 12 issues you encounter more and more of these characters from the original adventure in that original telling of the adventure and also through the second adventure, right? So very, very cool. So what is this book about? Well, like I said, there's two different stories and they kind of happen at the same time or they're told on the same pace. So when the second group encounters a place the first group's been before, you get both tales. You get what happened to the first group, how they conquered that, and then in the second grouping, you get what's different, what's changed, and why it's more challenging, and how they conquered that also. Like I said, there are places where they diverge, where you're hearing a story of the first group somewhere else, while the second group, the present, basically is doing things, and that's good and interesting. But again, this is where I found the map immensely helpful to help differentiate, like, oh no, they're here and the other group in the past is up here. You know what I mean? So I think this really does benefit from this collection, reading it all at once, having a map, all sorts of things. And maybe that's why I didn't give it the time of day past 3 issues when it first came out. But there's a lot of detail here. There's songs back here, so if you can read music, you can sing these songs. There's lore. There's like a whole... it's similar to Watchmen in that at the end of every chapter, there's 2 or 3 pages of something. Whether it's lore about a particular monster or just another tale of a race and how they overcame something, or just back history on groups of people, it's all in here. And then there's even more additional lore in this kind of back-end Dungeons & Dragons campaign appendix, right? So all that is contained in here. So I would say if you like Dungeons & Dragons, if you like Lord of the Rings, or both, you're going to love this book because it might give you something else to play or a new world to explore, but I think this tale here is so well told that it's really, really interesting. So who's in here, right? That's complicated because their names are not easy to pronounce. That is for certain. The main character, I think, actually is not... See, I even lost her name. The other guy's name. There's Tyr, who is the king when we first meet him, and he's the main hero of the original group, right? And he has a companion. I'm going to call her Cynthia, or Cyanth is kind of how it's spelled. This takes the whole idea of, like, how George R.R. Martin takes names and spells them differently and then pronounces them a little bit differently. This takes that to a whole nother level. I mean, you're talking about cities called Tirgolad and Orgolad and Boltgolad, Ruark, Eshua. There's a group of people here with pointy ears and yellow skin, and they're called the Elva, A-E-L-V-A. I guess they're kind of elves. Basically, they have magic. They're the only race that has natural magic. They're here in the world. This is one of the guys up here. And then you have this slave in the second group, and he, has a weird history and past, and how he gets caught up in the second group is interesting. And there's people from the first group that are on the same mission again to undo their mistakes in the second group. Again, the characters' names are so long and complicated, it's hard to remember them off the top of my head, honestly. But that's not to say that they are not memorable characters. It's just they're very difficult to pronounce, and there's no like appendix in the back to say like who's who. It's just who the races are, who the queen is, and who the king is. I know them, but honestly, it's a very good book. I like the idea of how this book unfolds. I thought maybe in the beginning that the two the past and the present storylines interchanging in the same location was a little hokey. But as they kind of diverged and it got more interesting, and the original tale, like the past tale, got more interesting in its twists and turns, and the heroes reveal themselves not to be heroes, so to speak. That got a little bit more interesting and drove the motivations for what the characters were doing in the present, in the second tale. So I thought that was also interesting as well. And then you come to find out, like, just like every other book, everybody's a flawed character, right? And nobody's perfect, at least in this world, and not in the world you're existing in now either. You know, forgive people. It's easy. Just forgive them and forget. But yeah, so that's a lot about the writing. Let's talk more about the art. Riccardo Federici is doing stuff here, like the main not bad guy, but the sickness that they're battling is called like the deadly flowers or something like that. And it's just kind of this undead vines that can infect people, can infect animals, all sorts of things, and turn them into these weird like flower vine monsters where, like, if you get infected, maybe it'll take over your arm or half of your face and stuff like that. It's kind of like The Last of Us, I guess, just way more grotesque and a lot more fast, with a lot of tendrils and a lot more black, as opposed to colors, like in The Last of Us, fungi. They're trying to reach a place called the Black Stair, and you get there in the last couple of issues in both tales, and it's pretty interesting. I think I could have spent more time there because there's so much built around that. Like, this is where we're going. You hear about that in the first issue, in the third issue, in the fourth issue, in the fifth. And so by the time you get there, it's almost as if they run up the stairs really fast, when one of the maps here in the back is a map of the Black Stair, and it looks like a months-long journey, and they just kind of skip over it a little bit. But maybe that's something you could do in your Dungeons and Dragons Fellspyre Chronicles campaign, right? Spell out what all the different adventures that they had back here. So that's kind of intriguing, right? It's similar to the Dark Tower in a way, the Stephen King series, in that there's like a place that they go to for the beginning and the end of the tale, and it's supposed to be this be-all, end-all thing. Kind of similar to the place in The Sixth Gun that I just read also. I guess that's a motif in these adventure fantasy worlds, of some place that is the beginning and end of the world. This one sits on the edge of the void. They're all kind of the same and different at the same time. But man, I enjoyed this way more than I thought I would. Honestly, like, I had such a bad time reading it in single issues when it was coming out, that this totally took me by surprise, reading it all together, in a couple of sittings here. So, man, this gets a full recommendation from me. Pick this up, seek it out. If you haven't read it, go check it out. Riccardo Federici is just on fire. The artwork is gorgeous. It's beautiful. The storytelling is incredible. The world is definitely laid out. There's so much history here. If you like how Watchmen is with all that backstory and stuff, you're into it. If you love Dungeons and Dragons, this is the type of story for you. And, there's a campaign for you to run afterwards with your other Dungeons and Dragons and friends. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So 2 thumbs up way for me. It's a long read. It's thick. It's not slow and plodding, but there's a lot to digest here, because, at least for me, because I was constantly going back and forth between issues, trying to figure out who's who, where's what's where, all with the maps, things like that. So I recommend this. I really, really enjoyed it. So that's my review of the Fellspyre Chronicles, Book 1. Let me know what you guys thought of this book down below in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.